Live from Care Paravel, it's Derailed Trains of Thought. Hello there, this is Nick Hayden.
And this is Timothy Deal.
Opening our 28th episode. We're really getting up there.
Yeah, number 30 coming up before too long.
I know.
Here. Although I have to ask Nick, if we're at Cara Paravel, what in the world are we doing a podcast? I want to be like taking fencing lessons with King Edmund.
I was going, I'm with you, but then this line came up and said, you need to do your podcast. And I said, okay, that probably comes first.
Yeah, he's probably right.
But you can go fence. I see there's a ship down there. No, that's later though.
Different.
I know, different time period. I'm
sure they have a ship though.
You know what? I'm going to step out. I'm going to come back. It'll be time to ride the Dawn Treader.
Because I hear time works differently here.
Yes, which is awesome.
Yes, very awesome. The Doctor would have a field day.
The Doctor would have a field day. Well, I don't know how well he would get along with Aslan, but still.
No, that's true. It would certainly change his perspective on a lot of things.
And he might be open. This most recent incarnation might be open enough to it.
Possibly. Yeah, that's possible.
So, I guess we'll stop rambling about being here in Narnia, which is lots of fun.
It really is.
But we've got to get down to this.
Telling you what, a centaur ride is pretty awesome.
I had some of the owls take me around, which was pretty blast.
Very cool. Very cool. As long as the beavers don't talk your ears off, it's good times here. At Care Paravel.
We're not letting them near the microphone. So, anyways, we'll start off with Story School. Our story school today, you may or may not have guessed, is about God and fiction, which we had warned you about.
Yes.
And I had sent out a Twitter question on randomly, and no one answered.
Oh, that's too bad.
Of course, the thing is it probably got buried under everything else.
Yeah, Twitter, it's...
weird. I need to say it like 10 times a day, and someone might see it.
Twitter.
Yeah, exactly. That's what the owls use.
Choo.
But this is a wide open subject.
Yes.
And Tim and I think are coming from slightly different angles.
Well,
Possibly.
Namely, well, I guess there's a number of ways you can take this, but I guess the starting off place, and we may get derailed from here, because that happens from time to time.
Yeah, I don't know. It seems like we should warn people about that with the title of the podcast or something.
Yeah. But what kind of role does God play in your story? Sometimes he plays a direct role. In the case of Narnia, he's personified in an actual character.
Yeah.
And probably, I think most people would agree, Lewis did that better than probably anyone else.
Yeah, in my own fiction, I've realized, I don't think it came off, I don't think I planned this, but I tend to like a barrier between, God's a figure in my stories, but there tends to be a layer of removal. I don't like to talk about God directly. Mm-hmm. It seems to be partly dangerous.
Yeah. And
partly... it's not necessarily how I've interacted with God in a very direct, like he talked directly to me. So a lot of my characters are kind of like the buffers between God and the rest of the people.
It can be a very tricky thing when you actually try to have God appear in your story. Like, I remember when we did The Revolution, an ongoing serial project, we had this character Melchizedek, who is essentially Jesus. But the problem is he kind of got to be a one-sided Jesus. He was all love and caring, and there wasn't any of the righteous wrath of God in any of that sense. It was, in a sense, a very 20th century or 21st century now Jesus. You know, all love and no.
It was kind of like a Bruce Almighty sort of.
Kind of Morgan Freeman.
Yeah. Which is actually a relatively good secular version of God.
Yeah. Bruce Almighty was a surprisingly good portrayal of God. And
I guess we should mention, if you have not been listening to our podcast, Tim and I both come from believing Christianity.
Yes.
So when we talk God, that's what we mean.
Yeah, the real God, not like Buddha or someone else. It's the God of Christianity. That's where we're coming from. Probably not really actually a big surprise to the listeners of this podcast.
No, but I mean, if they're new here. So.
Yeah, which is, there's always that possibility.
Hopefully. But I don't know that there's actually that many, that good thing offhand, shows where God, at least Christian God, comes in directly. Unless you're doing biblical stories.
A biblical adaptation.
Yeah. But I suppose you got God-like characters quite a lot well, not quite a lot, but more often in fantasies and stuff like that.
Well, even beyond that,
Star Trek V.
Yeah, that's a whole nother matter. what does God need with a spaceship? Which, actually, the Christian response to that might be, well, he doesn't need it, but if he chooses to use it, that's entirely a possibility. But let's not go into Star Trek 5 stuff. He made me lose my train of thought. That happens.
Podcast title.
Actually, and not even in just fantasy, because I've heard in film theory, they talk about the Christ figure a lot.
Oh, true.
So it doesn't even necessarily have to be talking about a direct allegory to Christ. Sometimes it's just, the man who takes on suffering to help someone else. That's a Christ figure.
Which they try to pull off in Superman Returns.
Yes. Yeah.
Doctor Who, especially with David Tennant, had done several times.
Yeah.
Like in Human Nature, especially.
And we talked a little bit about that in our Heroes episode, where sometimes when the character is just so good, he kind of takes on a whole godlike demeanor, which is always interesting when it comes up in a secular thing, because I always feel it kind of touches on a longing for God that they don't always even realize that they have. Well,
and sometimes you got these godlike figures where they're not pure gods, but they're like Greek gods, kind of.
Yeah.
Like, Babylon 5 tends to have, like, the first ones that are...
Yeah.
I mean, they're not immortal, but they're kind of...
They're uber spiritual. They're on a different plane of existence. They're higher evolved, whatever you want to call it.
And a lot of science fiction does that. It seems that science fiction tends to... Since they don't tend to have a god, they tend to have, well, sometimes godlike creatures.
Yeah. And in a lot of those cases, the godlike creatures, sometimes they mess things up because from the secular point of view, they've got more power than they really know what to do with. I mean, you look at, if you were to consider Jacob, I was going to say, Lost, Jacob, or the Man in Black in Lost, you kind of get the idea that these guys have way more power than they really know how, really could handle.
And those are so fascinating just because they're basically humans that were granted extra power, which is a very different way of looking. I mean...
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think the problem where a lot of secularists come from in trying to understand God is by applying human reasoning and human logic to things. They're like, God shouldn't have the right to condemn us for such and such reason because it's not right for mankind to do that.
Yeah.
In so doing, they kind of negate the fact that because God is God, he has the sovereign rights to do things that we humans can't do.
Now, it's interesting, and I find, and this is slightly off the track, but because God's such a different type of being, he's creator, he's always existed, and literature, at least, writing, tends to gravitate for talking about the human condition, which I think why we don't often have direct God figures. You tend to have people who play representations of what walking the righteous life or the evil life is, because it's very hard to get, especially on the more thoughtful... I'll use my Dostoevsky example.
I knew he was coming.
I know, because he's always talking about God, but God's not a figure. No. But he's talked about, like, especially in Brothers Karamazov. You have Ivan, who's kind of the atheist, who kind of exemplifies where you go if you follow the teleological conclusion. Everything's permissible without God, and then you have Father Zosima, who's kind of like the spiritual counterpart. The good spiritual counterpart. Mm-hmm. And you see his whole story and how his life was because of his faith. And I found that tended to be how I want to work, like Squire. There's obviously this sense of providence of God working, but there's nothing direct. It's not because I'm trying to avoid the issue, it's just because it's hard to talk about it in fictional terms directly. Mm-hmm. Because fiction is all about talking about things indirectly. Like, when I write fantasy... and create my worlds, they almost always end up more Old Testament style worlds. Mm-hmm. Because I don't see a good way. I find it very difficult to try to basically put Jesus in another world.
Right.
Because to me, well, Jesus is, reality with a big R, and it's hard to then talk about him indirectly.
Yeah.
Now, Lewis does it really well.
Who?
Lewis. C.S. Lewis.
Oh, C.S. Lewis, yes.
But you have to have a very specific type of world, I think. I mean, the world has to be built around... I don't know. I find it very difficult to do that in my writing style. And
in fantasy, that especially makes a lot of sense. But this kind of does get into, and I'd said we might get into this a little bit, about how you incorporate your religion and your faith. It's not just God, but your faith in general into your work. And I think you and I, we've always kind of gone with the understanding, this is derived from Tolkien and Lewis, of just telling your story and your faith will naturally influence that. There are other Christian creators that don't work that way. Like the people who do Facing the Giants and Fireproof
and Courageous,
those movies, Sherwood Baptist, I think, from Georgia, I think that's what they're called. I actually heard this interview when Courageous was coming out. One of them said in an interview something along the lines of, we consider ourselves preachers first and storytellers second. And when I heard that, I had this wince and a groan. I was like, I don't know. That works against everything the way I think as a creator.
Yeah.
And honestly, most of the film students that I would know at Regent also would have the same reaction. They're not real fond of that stuff, even though a lot of the evangelical church really loves what they do.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I got into this conversation I've talked about this with my mom sometimes, because as a creator, I don't like making overt messages in my stories, but I can't say 100%. I used to say I don't like it in any stories, but then when I was thinking about it, I was like, well, a lot of kids' stories, the messages are really overt, like Adventures in Odyssey, focused on the family. I grew up on that and I loved it. And, the points of each episode was crystal clear because it's for kids. Is that necessarily always wrong for an adult? I don't know.
Yeah, I think if you get, because I'm like you said, I'm on the same page as you. I want to tell a good story, and hopefully through it shines truth, shines religion,
which I think is inevitable. I think that will happen.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it comes off more natural that way. Now it might not be so. Sometimes I view it. I used to talk to our friend David Miller, who tends to be a little more direct in his sort of writing, and I always said that my writing is kind of like Jesus' parables. He who has ears, let him hear. Some people hear it, and some people they're just going to get the first level and not the second level or whatever.
Level, yeah.
So, yeah. But I think if the story itself is still honest, I guess you can get away with having more moralistic messages.
Yeah.
I mean, as long as the story's not being twisted.
Right. So that the characters don't feel real. That it's not a real sentiment. You're just kind of preaching at.
I think honesty plays a lot. Well, it's like, that's the thing with, like, VeggieTales, which is kind of like Adventure in Odyssey, but, video. They're just very natural. The jokes are very humorous, it's not like they don't feel boxed in to have a certain type of, here's things we can't talk about, or we have to be all preachy, I guess, for lack of a better word.
Right.
So it's a difficult thing. Like, I've been rereading my Vienna stories.
Mm-hmm.
Vienna, I think I've probably mentioned on here before, it's just this fictional small town. And those stories almost all the conflict for most of them tend to be some sort of religious idea.
Yeah.
And those probably come off a little more, here's the point of the story. And I don't know if that's good or bad. Sometimes I kind of I don't know, but I couldn't write it any other way. It's still what drove me to write the story.
Yeah. Well, and the tricky thing is, I think sometimes Christian creators sometimes go a little too far the other direction. They get so terrified of, or get so resistant to, as soon as they see a message, like, oh, they're being cheesy. This is being preaching. Because I mean, honestly, sometimes I have wondered that are we being too secretive in what we're saying? And I've seen some student films that were like, I have no idea what the point of what you're doing is here, because I don't get it.
Yeah. Yeah, because fiction's very interesting, because, like, I think as Dr. Cosgrove told me, and he probably got it from somewhere else, but fiction's the lie that tells the truth. So you're lying,
Yeah.
So there is a certain amount of hiding things that goes on naturally.
Uh-huh.
And, the more artistic you get, the more things are implied as opposed to stated. And I think if you're not stating things directly because of the style, that's better than not stating it because you don't want to sound, Christian.
Yeah.
Now, do you think, because there tends to be a very large knee-jerk to Christian films in secular market. Do you think there's other religions get the same sort of knee-jerk? I mean, or do they not even have movies?
It kind of depends, I think, a lot of times on where the movie is coming from. I have no idea if this actually exists, but if there's a company that makes, okay, well, let's go with, say, like, the Mormons.
Yeah.
Like, because I know there are some actual Mormon filmmakers and they make Mormon films.
Yeah.
My guess is, I don't know because I've never actually seen these, but my guess is that they would still kind of come off, kind of stilted. Most people would not pay attention to them. And probably the same thing with the film that was trying to be specifically Buddhist. Like, they were trying to communicate a Buddhist message. If, however, though, this film is coming from mainstream Hollywood and incorporates Buddhist ideas and kind of its own unique version of it, then
Well, and
it'd probably be more accepted.
When I was thinking sometimes you get kind of extreme environmental.
That's true.
Which is, depends how you want to read it. Could be religious
although I
belief
have
almost.
Although I have heard secular kind of reactions against that.
Okay.
Against that being too preachy too. Like
Like
movies like Fern Gully and
and,
Avatar.
And Avatar didn't bother me as much. Vern Gully, I remember, was insane. And what was it? Happy Feet.
Oh, I
was
never saw
annoying
that.
because it was a great movie, and then it has this very heavy-handed. And I think it's really the heavy-handed that gets people more than anything.
Yeah, and no matter what message is coming across, if it's too heavy-handed, then yeah, unless it's done by liberal filmmakers, and everyone in Hollywood would just absolutely love it because they don't see it being biased because that's their bias.
We're not biased. Everyone's biased, but
yeah,
as long as you realize that. Have you seen Tree of Life?
No, I haven't, and I really want to go because it seemed like for a while there were several weeks where like tons of Regent people on Facebook were saying, "Oh my word, I love Tree of Life so much."
I've heard good stuff about it. Heard people say maybe it's the reaction a little overblown, but it seems like that would fit right into this discussion.
Yeah. So too bad we haven't seen it.
I know. We didn't do our research.
Not that much. Actually, the Best Picture nominees, there's most of them I would really like to see. I've unfortunately not seen any of them.
Maybe we'll have to make a Best Picture series of talking points.
Yeah, at some point when we actually watch them.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm such a bad film student. Actually, I'm not a film student anymore, so maybe I shouldn't say that.
Exactly. You're a wonderful ex-film student. So, and I think what works with Narnia, going back to Narnia since we're here, is that there's plenty of people who read it and never realized the symbolism.
Yeah, although there are also people who would now, since this is America and it's a Christian country, and so there's a lot of people who don't. Okay, it's not necessarily a Christian country anymore, but there's a lot of understanding of the Christian ideas.
Well, what I think is that shows that if your art's good, you can get away with talking about whatever you want.
Yeah,
I remember a story, and I don't think I've said it on the podcast yet. Lord of the Rings. Christians read it, see all kinds of very true how the world works. As we believe from a biblical point of view. I remember one of the students at Taylor had grown up in a Druid religion from Britain or England somewhere. And first time she read it, that's what she saw in it. But then later on, when she became Christian, was studying it with Dr. Jordan, her entire view of everything had been changed.
Interesting.
Because there's so much Norse, stuff going on in it.
Right. Now, and the interesting thing is, some Christians would say, well, then, how is his message, how is Christian doctrine actually communicated then, if it's so obscure that people won't understand it? And I'd be like, well, I think if you study a work well enough and are considering, the authors, I mean, it doesn't take much research to find out that Tolkien was a Catholic.
Yeah.
So then I would still maintain that there's the seed for finding out more.
Well, and I do think also you can't take into consideration how everyone might interpret it, because there's all kinds of literary theories going on. Like they'll analyze Pride and Prejudice in socialist theory.
Yeah,
I mean, you can read on your point of view. If you have an agenda, you can read it into
anything
about anything.
No, that's
so
true.
Not only do you have to be as a writer honest to come off, as a reader you should probably be honest too with what is it actually saying. And there is a reader response. Maybe he's saying this, but this is what you got out of it. I mean, but here's my thing. If the Bible can be misinterpreted by by so many different types of people, and God had a hand in writing that, I think if you write it and people misinterpret it, you can't be held accountable. As long as you, in your best faith, wrote things.
Yeah, if you gave it your best, then you're...
Yeah, you're on it. You said, this is what I believe. I'm writing it to the best of my ability. I'm not trying to hide it or twist it or,
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So, getting back to this whole God part of it, because I knew we couldn't not talk about.
No, and I'm glad we went that way.
But who would you say, besides, if we're not looking in terms of an actual God depiction, like not Aslan, not Morgan Freeman, who would you say exemplifies, like you can see the image of God? Mankind is made in the image of God. Who might be a character in a story that you feel really encapsulates that? I can think of one example off the top of my head.
Okay, let me hear your example so I have a little time to think.
Uncle Iroh from Avatar: The Last Airbender.
Oh, okay.
And his arc by the end with his nephew Prince Zuko is very much a prodigal
Yeah.
son kind of situation.
I like that.
Forgiveness, patience, understanding, but he's also a warrior. So that's a show that has much more Eastern influences than Christian, but I think you can make a case for him being a very godlike, fatherly kind of figure.
I guess not so much godlike, but I know I mentioned in here before. I always thought George Bailey was a very suffering servant sort of represent that side of Christ.
No, I can see that.
Obviously, he has a little more despair than. Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, Jesus had his moments of being like, "Why am I even doing this?"
The Garden of Gethsemane.
Exactly, which I've always really enjoyed personally. So that one always kind of comes up. I don't know. I suppose you could say Jakar, kind of.
From Babylon 5.
Babylon 5. I wouldn't push it. It's more of a secularized version of.
He's
like
more
of
a prophet.
Yeah,
so I'm not sure about that one.
I'm trying to read through all my different. Randall Thor from Wheel of Time.
Okay.
He has all I mean, and Wheel of Time purposely kind of used all kinds of mythology sort of stuff, but he has a crown of swords, like thorns, and he has this injury on his side that won't heal, and he's supposed to die to save the world. Very Christ-like.
Yeah.
He is also married to 3 people and stuff like that, which is a little different, but...
Yeah, well... but, you know, there are a lot of stories.
And King Arthur.
Yeah, I was going to say, the whole idea of the Chosen One, which shows up in all kinds of fantasy, is very reminiscent of Christ.
Yeah, there's a lot of derivative...
Yeah, well,
stuff.
Anakin is derivative.
Oh, yeah, that's
true.
That
whole virgin birth thing. It's like, yeah, George, I think we know where you got that idea from.
But no, in the virgin, I don't know if the virgin birth comes in. There's weird births in all kinds of mythology.
I suppose that's true.
I know, and he studies Joseph Campbell and all that stuff.
Yeah, like Wonder Woman was like shaped out of clay and then breathed into life. She wasn't actually conceived.
I guess a lot of heroes in general tend to try to encapsulate a sense of Christ, because you would say it's not a Christian country anymore. It's not really, but the Christian idea, even if not the belief, has formed massive amounts of culture.
That is very
and
true.
Still does. I mean, that's still kind of one of the paragons of what a hero is.
Well, like you said earlier, Superman.
I thought Spider-Man 2, I thought that was very there was religious symbolism going on.
There was like when they were like carrying him through the subway.
Yeah,
it was very well, the subway train.
The L wasn't an elevated train.
Yeah, I suppose it was. Yeah.
It seems like I cannot remember what it was, and I have this less vague imagery of this science fiction movie somewhere. Well, at the end, he was almost like this second coming of Christ thing going on. We have and then we got anti-god people in like anime, like Gendo and Kari. It's like I'm going to kill God.
Yeah.
Or angels or whatever. And Xenogears, if you play that game, the main character in that one wants to kill. His mission is to kill God.
Really?
Yeah. He tells you straight up in like hour 3 that he's going to kill God. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and Death Note, which I talked about on here earlier, Light Yagami is definitely seeking to become a god in a sense. And there's some pictures and like credits and then various moments where he's very much in kind of a Christ-like pose and stuff, where they really play up the whole having power over death and element.
So, I mean, the influence of, and we've been talking mainly about God as in Christian God, but it has echoes everywhere, really, especially in the comic book era and the sci-fi and the places where they don't have once they remove the God, they push someone else into the spot.
One of the most interesting ones of, I guess you could say, this is where not where God makes a physical appearance, but actually his presence makes a very definite appearance. Raiders of the Lost Ark.
That's true.
Very interesting depiction of. I mean, I guess you could say in a sense it's making the Ark of the Covenant akin to like
an idol of some sort.
Yeah, Hindu voodoo or what have you. But still, I mean, pretty accurate.
Yeah. That's true. I mean, you don't ever think about Indiana Jones, but that's, the whole entire end is basically Deus Ex Machina.
Yeah. That's actually a good point.
That works somehow.
Yeah, somehow. I mean, you could sort of say that about... I wonder if that's one reason why some people... I mean, a lot of people don't like Kingdom of the Crystal Skull because it's aliens and stuff like that. But it did kind of miss... You do kind of miss that deserts, the Middle East kind of feel of having actual God there.
And I do think every time they try to replace God with aliens, I personally am way turned off. I think that's just a cheesy way of doing things. The knowing. The knowing.
Oh, the.
Or just, is it just knowing?
No, it's just, no, I think it's just
that
knowing,
movie,
yeah.
I don't know. If you watch that movie, I'm sorry. But.
Well, but that's like we've said, that's in a lot of science fiction.
There is a lot of science fiction, and it's overdone.
Yeah.
Really.
Well, oh man, the first season of Stargate SG-1, which I'm watching right now, for like the first several episodes, is them like going to say, no, this is not God. This guy is not God. This is just some really smart guy, and we're modern scientists, so we know way much more than you primitive people. And it got kind of old.
What's interesting, Stargate Universe, and before it got canceled, their whole purpose was to go out and they had found this message in the subparticles, but basically saying whatever had caused this message was what created the universe. And they didn't, there was kind of a small argument whether it was God or just some force or whatever. But so, I mean, it's always the first question, not Doctor Who, but the other first question is, in speculative fiction, people who ask big questions, they have to wrestle with that one way or another. Mm-hmm. And they come up with all kinds of answers.
Yeah. Yeah, and if our expertise was farther beyond speculative fiction, I'd try to bring in some more examples of people searching for God in dramas and stuff. But
like Waiting for Godot.
I suppose that's true.
Which is interesting. Because that's kind of a whole, absurdist parable of waiting for God. Waiting for Godot. And they just kind of... Yeah, it mocks faith. Not mocks it, but, is useless. Mm-hmm. It's an interesting, funny play, but also depressing.
Is there much room for God? This might be a complete side hit.
Yeah.
Is there much room for God in Brazil?
In the movie, you mean?
Yeah, the movie.
Not the... Not in the country.
I'm sure there is in the country, and not the movie.
I don't know that there actually was ever that wrestled with in Brazil. Okay. It's more of the freedom of creativity versus the kind of deadening of this sort of office culture. It's hard to explain without seeing it.
Okay.
But you have things like I didn't even think of this. Stranger Than Fiction. I mean,
the storyteller is sort of a godlike figure.
Yeah, and he's kind of a Christ, sacrificing themselves purposely. I mean,
that's true.
They play with that sort of thing.
But yeah, post-apocalyptic stories, it's interesting because I don't know. I think a lot of them they can be very nihilistic. Mm-hmm. Now, Book of Eli is a notable exception.
That's true. That's an interesting...
Which is a very interesting film, and I don't know that there's necessarily a Christ figure. The main character himself, Eli, I think is much more of a prophet than a Christ-like figure.
We got the Eli thing going on.
Yeah, exactly. But it's an interesting way of looking at, I don't know, would God allow... I mean, it's a imaginary sort of situation, but would God allow the majority of the Earth's population to be decimated and let it build up? I don't really see that reflected in the Bible, but can't rule anything out.
I should add, did you ever read the Left Behind series?
No, I never did.
Okay, I can't comment then either. I was just curious because that will be an interesting commentary on this.
Yeah, I feel like that's one that is much more on the side of overt messaging.
Well, it is, but I was wondering, a lot of people seem to really buy into it, though.
Yeah, well, and I know at least one person from TUFW who said that his parents basically got saved because of that series. So, more power to him, I guess.
And I guess I should mention, from an artistic point of view, it might be a bad book, but good evangelism.
Yeah. The problem, though, is that what can be good evangelism for one person may be bad art to another non-believer. Yeah. Just bad art, not very effective in evangelizing.
Yeah, and I really I don't know how well you can do direct evangelism and good art.
Yeah.
Because the one saying truth directly, and the other one's hiding truth.
It's a tricky thing, and I think a lot of it really depends on your audience. I mean, and the problem I always had with Left Behind, or really any end-time sort of thing, is that a lot of it is the scaring you into salvation method, which always kind of rubbed me the wrong way, and some people it rubs the wrong way. Other people it's effective for us, so I don't know.
To me, if I'm trying to evangelize, I'm going to do a nonfiction book. Mm-hmm. Because there's no reason to hide it if that's your purpose.
Yeah.
That's my thing.
I mean, I think there's certainly value in, and we're kind of repeating ourselves, but there's certainly value in showing people glimpses of God in your fiction and of beauty and of truth and so forth. that it's more of planting and watering a seed than necessarily
Or expanding horizons they already have.
Yeah. Oh yeah, exactly. So again, we don't necessarily have a conclusion as usual.
We've decided that our purpose is to get you thinking and not to give you answers.
Exactly. Yeah.
Which is what fiction's about.
Yeah, and sometimes questions can tell us more than answers ever will. That's
very zen there.
Well, it's also very much a lyric from Michael Card. So thank you to Michael Card for that.
Could it be you make your presence known so often by your absence? Could it be the questions tell us more than answers ever do? Could it be that you would really rather die than live without us? Could it be the only answer that means anything is you?
All right, so we better wrap this up before we ramble some more.
Yeah.
That was Story School. And now we'll do our first soundtrack.
My soundtrack choice for today, this is actually from the same album that Nick used a while back when we did our Moral Universe episode, I think. From
I think it was The Magic, actually, for Turkish Delight.
Oh, was it Magic?
I think so.
Okay, I couldn't remember which one it was. Anyway, this is from the music inspired by the Chronicles of Narnia, Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe movie. We're here. Yes, we're here. Okay. This song is by Reliant K. It is called In Like a Lion, in parentheses, Always Winter. And it kind of captures the whole idea from the first book of Always Winter, Never Christmas, when you're in a very dry spot in life. And I think it really captures the mood really well. And I actually used this song once to make an anime music video, and I'll include a link to that in the show notes, because
awesome.
It turned out fairly well. But because of copyright, I can't play the whole thing, so much like when we had Nick's song from that album, we'll bring you in for the second verse of the song. So enjoy.
It'd be so nice to look out the window and see the leaves on the trees begin to show. The birds would congregate and sing a song of birth, a song of newer things. The wind would calm and the sun would shine. I'd go outside and I'd squint my eyes, but for now I will simply just withdraw, sit here and wish for this world to thaw. It's always winter, but never Christmas. It seems this curse just can't be lifted. Yet in the midst of all this ice and snow, our hearts stay warm 'cause they are filled with hope. And everything it changed overnight. This dying world, you brought it back to life. And deep inside I felt things shifting. Everything was melting away. And you gave us the most beautiful of days. 'Cause when it's always winter but never Christmas, sometimes it feels like you're not with us. But deep inside our hearts we know that you are here and we will not lose hope.
For those who remember.
I guess you need to talk to the man.
For those who will never forget.
Posso emprestar as tuas tarefas de bio? and for a whole new generation that will experience it for the very first time.
Will there ever be a happy ending to this madness?
What are you doing?
I'm creating suspense.
Announcing the premiere of the 10th anniversary edition of the Taylor Trilogy, the romantic comedy series of love and relationships at Taylor University, Fort Wayne, featuring newly restored footage, unearthed and recut especially for this DVD release, together with new commentaries from the cast and crew, deleted scenes, rarely seen outtakes, brand new trailers, and more. The 10th anniversary edition is the new definitive version of this beloved amateur romantic comedy classic. Don't miss the chance to own this piece of TUFW history.
Can you believe he pays me to do this?
Available now from Derailed Trains of Thought. Visit our website for more information.
All right, that was an awesome sponsor, Tim.
Yes, we were sponsoring ourselves.
Tim's put a lot of work into the platinum edition of the Taylor Trilogy.
Yes, which let's go ahead and talk about that in our next segment.
Okay, which is Project Update.
So, yes, we've been putting a lot of work into the Taylor Trilogy
Hours
DVD.
and hours.
Well, it's kind of one of those things that, we had the idea to make a commentary for a long time ago, and we actually recorded it a long time ago. It was like back in August, wasn't it?
Was it that long ago? I was thinking it was later in fall, but maybe it wasn't.
August or September.
Wow.
Yeah, and I just got distracted with teaching a class, and then I had
life.
I had a project for
C'est la vie.
Texas Roadhouse in Fort Wayne, making a line dance video for their contest. But anywho, finally knuckled down. It's like, okay, I'm gonna finally get everything done for this disc that I wanted. So, and it was again one of those things that once we had ideas, they just kind of became bigger and bigger and rather monstrous.
With another 6 months, we could do even more.
Except, actually, the DVD is quite full at this point. So, but it's a great value, especially if you're familiar with it. There'll be a lot of really special goodies on it.
Yeah, but we have 3 commentaries for each of the 3 movies.
Mm-hmm.
We have bloopers, some of them that haven't been seen for ages.
Yeah, well, the outtakes for DTR has lots of new stuff because we actually went back to the original source tapes and
The ones we could find.
The ones that we could find. Unfortunately, there was one that's missing. So, did you actually watch DTR when you were?
Yeah, I did.
So
yeah, it's very. Oh, how pretty! Oh, what happened to the tape?
Yeah, but the first half is like all really nice, pristine quality, and the second half is like, ugh.
But you got rid of all the pauses, didn't you?
Yes,
which is nice.
Yes. Well, I mean, the thing is, you edited that movie back in 2003, so I can't imagine. I mean, how much the DV video was downgraded because of your computer system.
Oh, probably, yeah. I was still learning how to edit. I mean, the first one I was completely I'd never done much editing.
Yeah.
Second one I knew more. Then got Final Cut for the third one.
Yeah.
Which was awesome.
It was nice, yeah.
Final Cut was after that. I'm like, I'm never doing on anything but Final Cut.
Good times.
It was so it's quite entertaining. If you haven't seen it, it's worth. Why not?
Yeah,
come get it.
And it's still going to be on YouTube. It's not as good a quality as what you'd get on the DVD. And
you don't get all the bonus features.
You won't get all the bonus features.
Or commentary.
Yeah. But if you'd like to at least kind of take a peek at it, I think we still have a link for it on the website. And we've got information for it for the DVD itself on the website too. And we'll remind you where that is at the end of the show.
Sounds good. Yes.
So how is that's my big update. How's Strin and Fred going?
Strin and Fred's coming along. The last 2 weeks have not been very good for it, but generally I'm getting like a chapter done a week.
Actually, I guess we should be calling it the Eternal Night Saga.
I still call it Strin and Fred, but I'm trying to give it a cool name that actually makes sense in context.
Mm-hmm.
For on the book, the Eternal Night Saga, which just sounds awesome. But I say Strin and Fred. It's coming along pretty well, though this is going to be such a long book. I know I say that every time. But so I've written a good number of chapters since the beginning of the year, because the beginning of the year is really where I started pushing it. And I have, written 6 chapters or so, maybe more than that. I thought I was averaging about 1 a week. Mm-hmm. And it's all about, right now, Fred, who's, if you haven't read the book, kind of the younger hero who's kind of hot-headed and
the naive loudmouth.
Yeah, who's not quite as naive as he used to be. Which is kind of the plot line here, is trying to make him grow up, which he did a lot of actually in the last book. But this is kind of make him stand on his own 2 feet because his master's not there anymore. And then playing with this sort of half love triangle I have going, and then making sure that not everyone dies because everyone's sick and
Now,
die.
do they actually get somewhere in this book? 'Cause in book 2, they were like on this long caravan the entire time, and it was just a lot of travel. I mean, not...
No, it is. There's a lot. No, the book 2 is all internal conflict. It's a very different beast from the first. First one's like things happening every chapter and fights, and then book 2 is like, and we sit here for a while and wonder what we should do, and then we walk for a long time, and then we get somewhere.
I mean, it works for what you're doing. It's just
You can't do
different.
it for 2 books. Yeah, it's very different. Yeah. No, this one I spent a couple chapters with Fred getting them through the link to and then they end up by the Jabaki, which is this river. It's like, basically Brazil, but it's like Amazonish sort of territory, and then they end up right next to where Keck's old girlfriend is like a princess.
Oh,
there.
interesting.
So there's kind of, because Keck's this like superhero sort of, very buff, macho, Schwarzenegger sort of knight guy, and his wife, who's also a kind of a
who became more and more bitter as the second book went on.
So this is kind of going to be like the straw on the camel's back.
Yeah.
So we got that going on, and we got Webby, and we're trying to find this water that's supposed to heal him. So there's a lot of stuff moving, and then we have the bandits who are kind of like slowly making the Horizon morals disintegrate.
Now, okay, correct me if I'm wrong on this. Now, isn't the Horizon kind of a Midwest sort of setting?
Yeah.
Like very rural.
It's very
pastures?
rural, very Midwest, yeah.
And then they go to Brazil.
They go to, yeah.
Huh,
Write what you know.
In case you don't know, people, Nick grew up in Midwest, married a woman who grew up in Brazil.
Yep.
Not naturally Brazil. She was a missionary kid.
Yeah.
But still.
But write what you know. And actually, I'd always kind of had this envision from probably actually halfway through book 1. That's where they would end up going.
Okay.
Or at least by the first third of book 2. I don't remember where exactly all the details fell into place. But it's a nice, so they're playing fish out of water. Because they've got all these Horizon people. So they're fish out of water. They're all kind of desperate because if they don't find this cure, they're all going to die. And then you got the bandits who are all smiley and like slowly taking over the leadership of the group. And because the elders they're just lost. They're old men. They don't know
what they're doing.
They can't react to change. And Fred's like pounding his head against everything. And so there's a lot of stuff going on.
Cool. So, what are the chances that, because you've kind of split it into thirds, what are the chances that this third will be done by the end of the year?
Oh, yes.
Definitely.
My hope is to get both the thirds done by the end of the year.
Oh, had the whole book finished.
Yeah. Now, again, who knows, but I'm going at a decent pace. I would say I'm halfway through the Fred part.
Really?
Well, because I had some stuff already written.
Oh, that's true. Okay.
So it's going decently well. I think this third is going to be bigger than my previous third, though, which was like 50,000 words. So I could be wrong. I could guess wrong, but there's just so much stuff going on.
Cool.
So,
well, listeners can be looking forward to that, and they can be reading about, if they've never read Stren and Fred, they can catch up with some of the first chapters
on my website, worksofnick.com. And for the people who have seen it already, I'm trying to put little annotated notes, kind of behind the scenes, which you don't have to read, but people like Tim who they've already read it, and they're like, this is old news. They can kind of get little insights. I would like, my goal is to post it twice a week, but sometimes I don't get it done.
Yeah.
I try to get it once a week.
And your insights are they're not really spoiler-ish. They're
not normally. Sometimes they say like this shows up later, or sometimes but they're not real spoiler-ish.
I mean, you could say it alludes to, but it's not like you say, oh, and this in the later date, this character will die.
And it's kind of fun. I thought it's a nice little extra for people.
Yeah.
I don't think I have anything else going on, actually.
Well, that's funny right there.
I know. I have a couple flash fics I wrote this week just because I had it in my head for a long time, and I wrote them both in one night.
Really?
Yeah.
Impressive.
Finally, we'll finish up with our take
on Tales.
So, Tim, do you want to start, or shall I?
I guess I'll start.
Go for it.
So the other day I was at the library and had some time to kill and picked up this book.
Murder.
Picked up a comic book because I've been in the mood for a comic book. I tend to get in these moods where I really want to read some comic books, then I'll go through half a dozen, and then I'm like, okay, that'd be enough for a few months. But in this case, I picked up a book called Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow.
Is it Superman related?
It is Superman, and it's written by Alan Moore. Now, now I had heard about this story for a long time, and I was always a little leery of it because the only
Alan Moore,
yeah,
who's actually an insanely talented guy.
No, definitely. But the only Alan Moore I had read before the hand was Watchmen, which is very dense, very dark graphic novel. I mean,
graphic and novel.
Yes, very graphic, very novel. I mean, the climax has something to do with a benevolent act of mass terrorism.
Yeah, which makes sense in context.
Yes, it really does. But it is probably one of the best graphic novels written. It's difficult to like in some ways, but impossible not to admire.
Yeah, it is insanely well done.
So the only Alan Moore I'd read was that and The Killing Joke, which is a Batman story that's about the Joker being insane and trying to make Commissioner Gordon go insane by showing him pictures of his daughter, aka Batgirl, getting shot, paralyzed, and I think sexually abused.
That is really uplifting.
Yeah.
Thank you, Alan Moore.
Yeah. So he has a reputation for the Stark stuff. So I was a little afraid of what he might do as Superman. Actually, another side note. Had this great conversation with one of our faithful listeners, Greg, the other day about...
Hello, Greg.
Hey, Greg. About comics. And we both kind of agreed that as much as people like Alan Moore and Frank Miller probably saved the comic book industry in the 80s, they also introduced a lot of the factors that we don't particularly like about the medium now. All the grim and gritty and sometimes nihilistic stuff. Mm-hmm. But anyway, so again, I was very worried about this book, especially since this story is basically telling a final chapter for Superman. It was written just around the time of the Crisis on Infinite Earths, which ended the previous DC Comics continuity and was going to start it over. And so they decided, well, since we're going to start our, Superman magazines over again, starting back at number 1, how will we finish this out? And they're like, well, why don't we tell a story as if it's the end of Superman's career, basically. Yeah. Which had the potential to be interesting, but to be true to Superman, I wanted it to also be inspirational, to be uplifting. And thankfully, that's what this was.
Really? Oh, nice.
Yes. No, it's a very fitting tribute to the end of the Silver Age Superman, Silver Age / Bronze Age. I mean, there are characters who die, both good and bad.
Well, if it's going to be the end of his story, you're going to have some death.
Yeah, it has to be
epic
and big and stuff.
Have a sense of finality to it.
And, through the whole read, I was still kind of, because Superman's he's my first superhero, so I'm very protective of him. I want to see him go out right. And for the most part, I didn't really have a qualm. The only thing I really had a qualm with is I didn't really like the way Clark Kent's identity was revealed to the world. Kind of lame, in my opinion. But that's also kind of a pet peeve.
No, was this a graphic novel or a series of comics that got put together?
It was a series of comics, but it was really only a 2-part series.
Oh, okay.
So it was not like one of the more massive kinds of stories. It was very contained, but the basic thing was just a series of events. In some ways, not unlike Hush, in that you've got a number of Superman's villains that are working against him in unusual and more effective ways than before, and being kind of manipulated by someone. Hush kind of played with that same idea. They may have gotten some inspiration for that, but that was a 12-part series where this is a 2-part, so much more self-contained. But yeah, overall, very faithful to the Superman character, I would say, and like I said, also at the same time, also very inspirational.
So you would recommend it?
I would recommend it. And the hardcover book that it comes in now also has 2 other Superman Alan Moore stories in it. Or Superman stories written by Alan Moore. Alan Moore doesn't make an appearance in it.
Not many comic creators appear in their own comics anymore.
Except for Stan Lee.
But he can get away with that.
But they're decent. Oddly enough, they both involve Superman getting infected by an alien parasitic life form that gives him hallucinations.
Both of them?
Both of them. Well, one of them is the Jungle Lion, and it's a crossover with Swamp Thing, who Alan Moore did a lot of writing for.
Oh, yeah, I knew that, yeah.
Yeah, that one was... it was okay. The other one is called For the Man Who Has Everything, and that one I actually like quite a bit. It was actually adapted into an episode of Justice League Unlimited at one point.
Cool.
And it's pretty cool because it involves Wonder Woman, Batman, and Robin coming to the Fortress of Solitude for Superman's birthday. And they find him with this plant growing out of him.
Only in comic books.
Yeah. But in this case, it's a parasitic plant that gives its victim hallucinations of their heart's desire.
Oh,
So
interesting.
Superman thinks that he's on Krypton, which hasn't exploded and stuff.
Okay. Oh, interesting.
So it's a very interesting story. It's a great mix of character study and action, which you can't ask for much more in a comic.
No, that's about perfect.
And that's a story that probably talks more about his Kryptonian heritage. Like, I've always kind of felt like Superman probably identified as much with his human side as with his Kryptonian side, because that's where he grew up.
You're an earther.
Yeah. But there's certainly room in his character to explore both
Yeah.
sides of his personality, and that one explores the Kryptonian.
Interesting.
So, yeah, overall good stuff.
Good. I would like to read that because I actually have read very little Superman except what you've handed me.
Yeah.
So, well, I'll start. I have two. Well, depending on how long my first one go, I might not do my second. But my first one's an anime I watched recently called and I should have watched it before our romance episode actually,
Oh, yeah.
but called The Girl Who Leapt Through Time,
Which is a really cool movie.
which is a great movie. It's a very interesting combination of high school drama and sci-fi. And it's basically about this teenage...
Only in anime.
Only an anime. About this girl who accidentally gets this power to basically leap through time. Basically, she can jump backwards and relive certain things. And then jump back into present, believe.
I think so, yeah.
The time travel mechanics are a little crazy.
Vague.
But
Yeah.
you don't, you don't care.
Yeah.
Because they play it so much, like there's this one time where she's doing karaoke with her friends because that's, what Japanese do. And the hour's almost up, so she wants to do it again, so she jumps back and does it another hour, and I think she ends up saying she's sang karaoke for 8 hours, the same hour 8 times, and no one else knows, so, and then there's also this love story about whether, well, I won't go too much away. And it's it's beautifully well done. The story's compelling. The girl's funny. The way she lands from her time jumps is absolutely genius.
I knew that would crack you up.
If you've never watched anime, it wouldn't be a bad one to start with, I don't think.
No, not really.
If you're one of those who are they're too weird, they have all kinds of bizarre stuff going on.
Well, yeah, like the very first time she time travels, it comes out of nowhere, practically.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very they throw the time travel, and then it melds really well.
Yeah, no, it really
and
does.
it talks about, are there consequences to changing things,
Mm-hmm.
The only problem is the end is overly vague, I think. Well, two things, because first off, I don't know how much I can say without spoiling it, but there's basically 2 pieces of information that you would really like to know that they don't give you, and if they had only left one of them vague, I don't think I would mind as much, but they leave both vague. First off, this sort of, the love relationship is kind of put on hold, and you're given this idea that it's going to get back together, but logically, there's no real way for it to happen.
Yeah. Well,
Just think time travel and stuff like that.
well, it sort of implies. I don't think this is giving too
Okay,
too
yeah,
much away.
I wasn't sure. I've wrestled with various things, but
Yeah, it kind of seems to imply that there's a massive in between.
oh, there's like a post-apocalyptic event
Yeah,
or apocalyptic
there's
event.
there's apparently some massive change to the Earth in between the girl's present and her future.
Yeah,
If
like a massive deal.
yeah, which is kind of bizarre to just kind of leave hanging for what is otherwise a very lighthearted.
Yeah. So you have that this sense of doom if you play it logically. The sense that the guy and the girl don't really get together, but they're like, oh, but we'll meet each other. And you're like, but how? And then there's this painting that is apparently insanely important to one of our main characters.
Mm-hmm.
You kind of get a sense why, but you feel like there's more to the story.
Yeah,
Possibly. I don't. They just put so much emphasis on that painting.
that seems to be a very Japanese
And
storytelling device. They like leaving a lot of stuff off screen.
And I don't mind that necessarily. I just felt like there was almost just one too many things off screen at the end.
Yeah.
For me to be satisfied. I recommend the movie to anyone. But it was a little, especially if you look at it logically, if you look at it strictly emotionally, you can probably be a little more satisfied.
Yeah.
Apparently, it's actually a kind of a sequel to a live action movie.
Really?
Yeah.
I did not know that.
The aunt that she talks to was the character in the previous movie.
Really?
And that's why they're always talking about her. And she says she used to jump through time and stuff like that.
Oh, I did not know that.
And that movie is based on a book.
Wait, based off a book? So adapted from or a spinoff?
I think adapted. I think the original live action movie is adapted from a book.
Okay.
And then this is kind of a half sequel.
it'd be really interesting if there is a sequel of like this live action movie is a sequel to this book, which is
And apparently that live action movie is being remade or has been remade. Apparently there's like four or five different versions of this story in Japan.
Huh.
Or variations of this story.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I was looking on Wikipedia trying to figure out if because the ant was one of those things you felt like they linger on some of her like pictures and stuff kind of over long.
That makes a lot of sense. I didn't know that. It's interesting though that that's the only one that kind of migrated over here. I mean, like not the live action, just the anime.
I guess it was kind of limited release in Japan and just went off really well. I think it just hit off really well in Japan because it is just it's a beautiful movie, and it's just paced really well generally.
It almost feels like a Studio Ghibli film, but it isn't.
Yeah, it does feel that sort of quality. Which, speaking of which, I need to go watch the.
I know, I need to too. I was wondering if you remember that was out.
Well, what's it called? The
Tales,
of Ariarity.
Ariety, The Secret.
It's basically the Borrowers.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, The Secrets of Ariarity.
Yeah, Tales. I'm thinking Tales from Earthsea.
I read somewhere that Miyazaki's supposed to have a new film next year.
Oh, really? Directed by him?
Directed by him.
Okay, because I heard
this
he wrote
one.
the story.
Yeah, he co-wrote.
Co-wrote, I
this
think.
one.
Yeah, we need to get out there and see that.
Yeah. All right, so those were two pretty interesting. So go either read the Alan Moore story or watch the anime. It's on Netflix. That's where I got it from. It's worth the hour and a half.
And whatever happened to the Man of Tomorrow is probably pretty accessible because libraries who collect graphic novels know Alan Moore is big and obviously Superman is big. So it's out there. You should be able to find it. I think it was the hardcover I read was published in 2009.
Oh, so it's very new too.
Yeah.
I mean, relatively.
Yeah.
All right, let's finish up with some contact info.
Okay. You can visit us at our website, derailedtrainsofthought.blogspot.com.
We should have a link there for the Taylor Trilogy if you're interested in getting a copy of it.
By the time this episode comes out.
You can email us at derailedtrains@gmail.com.
And
you can follow us on Twitter, I guess.
That's true.
I don't know. I'm Nick_Hayden.
Storyteller Frog, all one word.
You know, if you follow us, say hi, say we love your podcast, etc., etc. So
let us know you're out there.
And leave a comment. We love comments. Even if it's just like, hey, I listened to it. You know, that's nice.
Oh, yeah. Or if you want to tell me that Alan Moore is absolutely the best thing that ever happened to comic books and you should be ashamed forever. Okay. You can tell us that, too.
Yeah, we don't mind disagreement.
Yeah.
We'll just blacklist you. But, all right, I guess I'll end up with my soundtrack.
Go for it.
Mine's a little longer. It's it's pushing 6 minutes. So we're putting it at the end here. But it's called Pillar of Salt by Star Salzman. It's a remix of a song from Xenogears, which is very a religiously oriented video game.
Which I don't think I've listened to this yet.
You've heard it before.
Okay.
I think. But anyways, why I picked it, besides it's like completely awesome and one of the best things on Overclocked Remix, is that inside of it they use the like Hebrew and Arabic lyrics for the story of Lot's wife turning into a pillar of salt and one of the Psalms. Sometimes I listen to it and think I would love to do some sort of music video of like Abraham sacrificing his son or some sort of biblical story to it because it just has this ridiculously epic biblical quality to it.
Cool.
So I hope you enjoy it.
Is this the one that's on from that one remix CD? It's like it's all in Arabic, like the.
Yeah, I think you've probably heard it. Yeah.
Okay.
So I think you'll enjoy it. It's different than I think anything else we put up so far.
Most likely.
Which is always fun to do.
Yeah.
And it's just ridiculously awesome. All right. So this has been Nick.
And this is Tim.
And we're gonna spend about 50 more years here, and then we'll come back to Earth.
Yeah, we should be back at Earth in about an hour, I think.
Yeah, that would be good. Yep.
So, all right, farther up and further in.
Adios.
Bye-bye.
What's wrong?
It's nothing really. It's silly.
Is it homework related?
No. Don't. Just go back.
Then it's a girl.
No, it's not. Okay, maybe it is.